So the question is really simple. Who remembers Malcolm? Who remembers Malcolm? Who remembers Hajj Malik El-Shabazz? Who remembers him, and why do you remember him? So whoever would like to start, and we go pass these mics around.
I'll take the lead. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. I want to greet you with free the land. 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 That is the greeting, not only that we use in the New African Independence Movement, it's also a command. That is a goal, that is an objective. We got the land as an objective for our liberation struggle from Baba Malik, Hajj Malik Shabazz. And I remember Malcolm X from, he was my first teacher. I was in prison when I discovered Malcolm X. I didn't even know what a Muslim was before going to prison. I didn't know anything. I was what they called in Islam, deaf, dumb, and blind. And I met Malcolm X in prison, and he helped transform me. His example, I was able to relate to Malcolm X. I remember him based on his impact in my own life. Malcolm helped broaden my perspective. He helped me see the world, because he talked about the world. Malcolm wasn't just a militant, as he was characterized. He was also a nationalist. But more than that, he was also, in the context of today's political climate of genocide on this planet, he was an internationalist. He was very knowledgeable about the world, and he brought that knowledge to his audiences. And I remember those things from Malcolm, and that influenced me and helped me begin to look into the world and understand and connect myself to other people's struggles as well.
Okay. Anyone else?
Wait, Mama Shushanna, it's 2 mics up there. Just let them pass those 2 mics. There's one right in front of Nancy.
Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing tonight?
All right.
What up, though? That's right. I'm very honored to be sitting up here. Thank you very much, Sister Shushanna, for the invitation. It truly, truly is a blessing, because to me, Malcolm X was that fire that I needed to discover who I was. He was that catalyst that allowed me to open my eyes and see the power within me and within my people. So Malcolm, brother Malcolm X, really gifted us with knowledge and words and a framework for the condition that we find ourselves in. And I'm sitting up here as someone who immigrated to this country from West Africa. Shout out all my Nigerian brothers and sisters. I see you over there. Hey now, how far? Okay, so I say that because one of the worst crimes that the white man ever committed was to go to Africa and tell us Africans to not connect with the black folks in America, right? Told the Africans to hate the African Americans, told the African Americans to hate us back home, that we were just uncivilized, hanging from trees, and kept asking, do you guys play with monkeys and lions? Beyond offensive, to be the birthplace of civilization. Yet the white man contorted the story so much, because when you are the constant purveyor of harm and violence and murder and plundering, you write the story. But what Brother Malcolm X was able to do was show us that there's more to our story. That our lineage, our history, our strength does not start from slavery. It starts way before then, when we were kings and queens and goat herders and everything in between, right? And when a people does not know who they are, when they don't understand where they came from, the great lengths of dynasties, we get lost. Malcolm X was lost for a moment, like so many others are right now. But the sad part is that they don't have to. When you understand your history, you know where you're going. I'm gonna say that again for y'all. When you understand your history, you know where you're going. We all inhabit Sankofa. We have to look back as we go forward. So for me, Malcolm really was that great uniter. What he was trying to do after he came back from Mecca is the reason why he was shot down. When you unite the people, when you break down barriers, when you don't look at skin tone, we are a beautiful people. Just look at the hues sitting before you today, right? And so anyone who is willing to bear arms, figuratively, literally, whatever that means for you, you have an absolute duty to do it. Brother Malcolm X is a martyr, but not one of his own choosing. One that was shot down way too young. I'm 38 years old, and I pray to God that I can accomplish in my lifetime what he did in his 39 years. He's opened our eyes to who we are, and when you know who you are, they cannot take that away from you. And so as Brother Kari read from The Ballad or the Bullet, that was one of the most powerful speeches that really centered me in who I am in my walk on this life. We have to do the fight. We have to do the work, or else they will continue to shoot us down. But we must speak truth to power. Because when you can see past color lines, when you can see past religious and different creeds, we then really start to wage this fight for human rights. Who was Hajj Malik El-Shabazz? He was the greatest human rights activist we've ever known in our lifetime. And we must all continue that mantle. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening and peace. It's so good to be with y'all tonight. I was laughing when Paul was starting us off because I'm like, man, he expects somebody up here to say something real controversial tonight. He gave a nice long warning for y'all, so I don't know which one of us is going to be. I don't know, it ain't going to be me. But I want to, I'll reflect on this first question just a little bit. So the question was, who remembers Malcolm, right? And I think, my short answer is, we all do, but in our own ways, right? Everybody's got that version of Malcolm that they remember, or that aspect of him that they connect with. So, when I think about this question, or when I was thinking about just reflecting on his legacy in general, it took me back to a moment I had in college with a professor that Paul might remember, a guy named Barner Hesse. And Professor Hesse was a brilliant man, but he was a black Brit. And he was a scholar on race. And he was known to really challenge the black students who were in like the African American Studies program. And I said something one day to the effect of, and particularly talking about Malcolm, we failed our leaders. And he kind of like picked up on that, and he was like, what do you mean by failed them? Like, what is your responsibility to them that you can say you failed them, especially someone who passed 40 years before this moment, right? And, I think what kind of, and this is why I mentioned that he was a black Brit in particular, is that, when you love your leaders, then you feel a sort of accountability to them, or a responsibility. If you love your leaders, then you'll make a statement like, we failed them. If you've got this kind of distant scholarly relationship with their ideas, or you kind of analyze them as a historical figure amongst many others, and there's this kind of like, again, there's this distance, there's this buffer, there isn't this total familiarity. But like Malcolm, for us, like, you love Malcolm because he loved us so clearly, right? Like it was just a natural reaction to learning his story and to hearing his words. Right? I think about, there's a handful of Muslims in the room I see or recognize. I think about, I'm a convert to Islam. I converted when I was 20 years old. I converted in large part because of the words of Malcolm X, and I can talk about that a little bit more later. But one of the things that when we become Muslim, like as an adult, you have to learn to love the Prophet Muhammad. It is a completely foreign starting point for a convert. I didn't have to learn to love Malcolm X. I'll just be honest with you. That just, like, the starting point of my relationship with Malcolm from reading the autobiography when I was 14, and from then starting to read his words, was what felt like a mutual love, right? So, you know, and hopefully, you know, the Muslims in the room feel like I stopped shy of saying something blasphemous there, but I'm just giving you my honest relationship that I had, you know, come to develop with this man, this leader of ours. When we talk about who remembers him, I mentioned, you know, part of it is the complexity of it, and, you know, there's these various pieces of him. You know, I think I mentioned this last year, but, you know, Dr. Betty Shabazz, she said to a group of Muslims one time, she said, you know, the Muslims need to claim Malcolm. The socialists claim him, the black nationalists claim him, but the Muslims don't claim him, right? That was an indictment against the American Muslim community, to not claim this man who helped to establish Islam. And now every time around this year, I mean, you'll hear a select group of Muslim scholars or speakers talk about Malcolm being the reviver of Islam in the 20th century, especially in the Western world. But it's never enough, and it came far too late, and it's like we seeded that legacy for a number of years, right? But these different communities, we all tend to claim different parts of him, because the black nationalist community won't necessarily acknowledge the importance of Malcolm's faith in his life. When I say to you, Assalamu alaikum, when I start by saying Assalamu alaikum, I'm greeting you the way that Malcolm X would have greeted you, right? That is the greeting that he gave to us, actually. You know, but at the same time, a lot of Muslims will erase that he died with black nationalist politics. Clearly and point blank, right? Like there's no question around that. He died with a very specific political analysis alongside his faith, right? So I'll close on this as sacrifice. You know, because I disagree with just two things that my sister Nancy said. So number one, you know, way too young. I don't know what that means, because from the way I look at life, each of us has a prescribed time of death. We don't know how it's coming to us, but it's written. It's going to come at some point. Malcolm's time came when it came. We were blessed to have him for the time that we had him. We are blessed to have had his life documented in the way that it was documented, to have his descendants still amongst us to connect directly to his lineage, right? Like, that is what we should cherish. But Malcolm absolutely knew that he was signing up for martyrdom. Malcolm absolutely knew that he had the choice to relocate, that people were asking him, expatriate, come live with us over here for a while until it dies down. Like, let the heat go away. It's too dangerous right now. Malcolm said no. Malcolm gave himself to the movement. Malcolm said, we live in revolutionary times. Malcolm knew that his death would be a catalyst for the revolution. And to that point, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, now in my mid-30s, I can finally say without guilt that I'm actually not a revolutionary. Not in the way that Malcolm was. Because Malcolm said that revolution requires violence. He challenged us to give him an example of a successful revolutionary that did not involve violence. And yet, you know what I'm saying? This father of three is trying to go home every night to his kids and raise his sons and impart what he can to them in the time that he has. You know, when we talk to Muslims, like, you know, if you are so just completely disenchanted with the politics of this country or the moral direction of this country or what have you, you got an option. It's called hijra, right? In Arabic, that's hijra is to migrate, to leave, right? Like, we all have an option. You can be a revolutionary, or another version of that is you can leave, or if you're gonna be here and pretend like you don't benefit from the wealth of this country, you're just like the conservative businessman who pretends like he don't benefit from the roads that he moves his products on and that he shouldn't have to pay taxes for that stuff. So at some point, you gotta engage, like civic engagement, no matter what that looks like. It might be voting, it might be a million other things. But I'm just saying, like, it took me a long time to sit back and say, you know what? Like, life matters, stability matters, and engagement matters, and maybe I'm not the revolutionary I thought I was when I was 16, rereading Malcolm, blasting Rage Against the Machine, talking about some of those that run forces are the same that burn crosses. And they are, but I'm just saying, you know, there's different paths here. Malcolm was a real revolutionary. We should be inspired by that. A lot of people, y'all like me, we're not real revolutionaries. I know some people in this room are, but some of us got to wake up.
Malcolm X, to me, when I was teaching at Howard, I was teaching a class on blacks in the arts. And I used to ask my students, was there a text or a work of art? It could be a painting, a work of music, a novel, or poetry, but any art form that changed you to the point where after you read or experienced or encountered this art, you were not the same person you were before you read or encountered this particular text. And in many cases, in fact, everybody who had read the autobiography of Malcolm X said that that was the book in which they were not the same person they were before they read the autobiography of Malcolm X. For me, it was the same thing. Another book or text that I got a lot of responses was Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, because nobody had seen anything like that either. And I know when I first saw it in high school, I was not the same person I was when I left and saw that play. Same thing with the autobiography of Malcolm X. Almost everybody that read that text was transformed in some way, even those that had to reject it. And that, to me, speaks to a kind of power, what we may call a monomythic hero, an archetypal hero, like a prophet. And we do still have prophets in the miniature, like Nat Turner, I would put in that category. Harriet Tubman would be in that category. Malcolm X, I would put in that category. His words had that kind of numinous power to transform your soul. Ashe. And so that was something really divine. It was a divine revelation. I had a book at home called Dramatic Prophecies of the Great Pyramid. And in that book, I was really shocked. It was written by a Mexican archaeologist. He talked about the Great Pyramids, you know, how they have the history, past, present, and future inscribed in these various codes and symbols. And he was saying that the black movement in America, the black consciousness movement in America, that it was predicted in the Great Pyramids, that we will begin to see ourselves differently. We will begin to see ourselves as the God of the perfect black, which is the meaning of Asar, who, by the way, is the same as Noah, and who is considered an eponymous ancestor of all African people, as well as Abraham. This is in the genealogies and the history of Africans here and in the diaspora, when you look at the folklore. And these are the two people that we have. So Malcolm was able to connect us to our true ancestry, to our true heritage. He was able to connect us to Africa. So there was a direct link from God to the prophets, to the sages, the kings and sages that were righteous, all the way through this pristine word, the power of the word. And by the way, the meaning of the word, even in English, which goes back to the Celtic language, means man's living spring. It's a living spring, it's alive. And what Malcolm had was what we may call that pristine spring, okay, which the monomythic hero or the national cultural hero carries. So they become exemplary models of, like you said, humanity or human activism, of the divinity of human. And I'd like to say another thing about the word Rab, which is the word for Lord in Arabic, which, by the way, is an African language, and anybody who wants to dispute me, I'm welcome to challenge that. Because any language that was spoken at first by African people is an African language. It was created, it was perpetuated, it was, all right, by the Cushitic people of Saudi Arabia, the Cushitic people of the Middle East, the Cushitic people of West Africa, and it spread. Aramaic is another African language. Hebrew is an African language, the Canaanite language. And I can go on, but there are a lot of mistakes that have been made, even in the Afrocentric community, that's is causing divisions between us. But all I can say is Malcolm was about the unity. He understood he could unite people because he had the divine word. The divine word. And the word Rab, which means Lord, means the one who by degrees nourishes man to his initial state of perfection. That's what Malcolm was about. He was like a Rab. He was like the Lord to nourish us by degrees to our initial state of perfection. And perfection doesn't mean that you don't mistake. Perfection just means balance. Again, in Arabic, balance. Okay.
I think Paul has the next question. I just wanted to respectfully disagree with our brother Mark, if I heard his comments correctly. You used, yeah, y'all said it was going to be some controversy. Yeah, so you said, at least what I heard you say, that there's a thing or a term that if you don't like it at a place, you're welcome to leave a place. And I don't know if you were referencing this place, but I don't like this place. And I'm talking about the United States of America, KKKA. I don't like it, and I know I'm welcome to leave it, but I'm not leaving nothing. I'm not leaving it because our ancestors built this place. So we got just as much, we have more claim than the people who are making our lives miserable, and almost as much claim as our Native American brothers. So I just wanted to get that out.
So and I don't disagree with that. And when I mentioned that in particular, I was talking about the Muslim community, and that's why I was talking about the phrase hijra in particular. And I was specifically, or most specifically, talking about the non-indigenous Muslim community, meaning not black Muslims, not people born here, not people who are of the African diaspora, who are descendants of slaves. So just to be 100% clear with that, and I'll just make my point without taking too much time. Just make my point a little clearer. What I was saying was, and it was with respect to the nature of the sacrifice that Malcolm was willing to make when he said, "I'm going to give my life for this revolution." I think that when you analyze this, the situation that we find ourselves in here, and you say, like, how do I go about my relationship with this place? One option is to withdraw completely. And, again, for Muslims, we talk about the end times and this idea that, like, our best course of action is just to withdraw and take care of your family and your connection to your Lord before your social interactions, right? Like, same thing in this country. Like, maybe the best thing is just to withdraw. But the point that I was trying to make is, if you are here, no matter how much you withdraw, you are still complicit. That was the point that I was trying to make, is we all, by our presence here, we still benefit from the monster, from the machine. So some people, especially so the point I was trying to make was, they're like, Muslims are taught, and again, I was using the word hijra, I was talking to the Muslims in particular, like, we're taught that the world is vast. You can travel to seek justice. Like, you can leave a place if you can't find justice there.
Right.
So I was offering extremes, that, like, leaving is an extreme. Okay. Revolution is an extreme. And and if you ain't really about revolution, you're gonna have to figure out what does engagement mean to you. That's the point I was making.
And I totally agree with you on that point. And Malcolm made it clear that a lot of people are not revolutionaries. And my brother preached a lot about people walking around pretending like they're revolution. Revolution is blood. And if you're not ready to shed some blood, then you may not be a revolutionary.
Yeah, so, and that's a powerful point. I know some folks might want to respond to that. That dialectic right there was very important. The thing that I'm going to say is actually going to build on that, so you'll still respond to this, but Yeah, I appreciate Mark's clarification because it really does really align with what Malcolm said in his speech. I think that was message to the grassroots. We talked about bloodshed. The thing that I wanted to say in preface to this question is that Malcolm's death was a tragedy. Malcolm did not commit revolutionary suicide. Did not pick up an AR-15 or Krishnikov, in the way that Brother Echevarria did to, launch the first attack in Cuba to liberate Cuba from the fascist regime. That's revolutionary suicide when Echevarria says, "Hand me my Krishnikov," and he goes out blazing. He's on fire, right? Malcolm did not do that. Malcolm endeavored to give a speech that evening, and Malcolm was endeavoring in the work of building organizations when he died. So I want to offer that revolutionary work does satisfy also, I'm not disagreeing with anybody, but does satisfy also the long-term strategic approach of building things that can actually sustain people to do whatever they need to do necessary to be free. Because if you're in a 6-year, 8-year campaign against a fascist regime, you need food, you need medicine, you need petrol fuel, you need vehicles, you need doctors, right? So you need community life just to be a human on this planet, even for one day, even for 1 year. So no matter what endeavor, Malcolm's showing us that when he died, it was a tragedy. His life was taken from him. He did not lay it down, but he was ready to die. And I think that's very important because the question I wanted to put to you is, many people have variations of the quote that you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. They even say that if you incarcerate one or you kill one or you cut down one, you only multiply them by the thousands who remember them, by the tens of thousands who honor them, who study them, who commit to them more fervently, right? They even said in a speech in Britain when the German fascists bombed the British fascists, that the bombing only strengthened their resolve. So the killing of people, someone like Malcolm, the killing of our heroes only strengthens our resolve. It only makes us more stubborn and more determined to see Malcolm live into the future, to multiply that work of institution building, of revolutionary consciousness raising, of education, of internationalism. So I want to ask, where is Malcolm's spirit alive today in the work? If there's an initiative or if there's a move or something positive happening that you see, that if you didn't know who was in charge there, you might think Malcolm had come back or Malcolm had never died. And if not, what do we need to do? I know Brother Baba Kwasi always talks about what do we need to do to revive and reanimate the spirit of Malcolm in our work?
Let's make something clear. Malcolm said that revolutions are bloody. Revolution means change, period. We need change. Now, if it get bloody, it's because in trying to make change, they make it bloody. But we bleeding already. Let's be clear. People dying right now. It's a genocide happening right now. United States was the first Israel. This is a settler colony. Let's be clear on that. Malcolm was a Muslim, a very devout Muslim. But he was also a revolutionary, and revolutionaries don't have to go out and start shooting. That's a stereotype. Revolution it's a process. Malcolm was a teacher. One thing we don't do is learn. Most people haven't read Malcolm's words. We see clips. Most people haven't even got on YouTube and watched his full speeches. Malcolm was a work in progress. He was cut down before his work was done. He was in the beginning of his institution building outside the Nation of Islam. Let's understand that. The Organization of African American Unity was modeled off the Organization of African Unity. He was beginning his work. And he was making international connections and ties. He was a Pan-Africanist. As the brother said, they did invite him to Africa for refuge, for sanctuary. He knew the work needed to be done. Wasn't nobody doing it the way he was doing it. And there are people doing that work today. They're not shooting guns. I'm not advocating for nobody to go out and put themselves on the line. There's a lot of organized need to be done. It's only a handful. Malcolm X's speech, I passed out a bunch of quotes from Malcolm X to this audience. All those quotes are different. And in one of those quotes, he talked about how they refer to us as nationalists, and people kind of become afraid of nationalists because they think nationalists want to, just disrupt. And we do. And we do. The status quo cannot persist. Everybody not benefiting from corporate America. We here, the mass majority of us are suffering. Mass incarceration don't exist by accident. Those people are in there. Most of the people that's committing crimes are doing it for acts of survival. Malcolm X understood that. That's how he ended up in prison. That's how I end up in prison. And we learn, and we try to figure out what it is that's going on in this world and how do we fit into it. Everybody got a role to play, and all of them ain't picking up a gun, trying to train and, act ultra-militaristic. That's not everybody's role. Some people got to teach. Some people got to cook for the teachers. Some people got to fix the cars of the people that's taking the food to the teachers. I mean, it's a lot of roles for everybody. Malcolm X understood that everybody wasn't the same. We got, one thing we can't do is dilute the work of national liberation. Those was his last words, and whether they was going to be his final words, we don't know. Because he was cut down at the age of 39. I met him at age 21. I'm 53. I didn't live longer than Malcolm X and have achieved much less than Malcolm X. I'm still trying to measure up. He set an example. We still trying to, distill what did Malcolm X mean? He was a family man. But he knew, he went out there to the Audubon Ballroom, he knew what he was up against. He knew his enemies, and, he knew. I'm sorry, y'all.
Thank you, brother. Go ahead. That's what we're here for. I appreciate that. Thank you, absolutely. That's all facts. For me, I hear you, brother, but for me, I feel like when your eyes are open, similarly like Malcolm, you can know, first off, the only two things in this country that we know for sure are death and taxes, right? So I can know that death is imminent or I'm doing something that's dangerous, but I'm doing it not for sacrifice. I'm doing it because that is literally the only thing that I have to do. I must do it. I'm an attorney by trade, right? And it wasn't until this country showed me just blatantly, showed all of us what it thinks of people who have black skin, who are from African descent, that they will shoot us down, they will lynch us on national television through your cell phones, and they don't give a damn about it, right? So what are you going to do? I am in no way, shape, or form at the height of Malcolm and what he did for us and what he did for this country and of people, but I damn sure am not stopping until we get to liberation. I have 2 little girls. I do not have a choice. I have to fight for their freedom. I'm fighting the only way I know how, right? I'm not picking up the guns, but I'm trying to spread knowledge through our children and community. I'm trying to free people. We're trying to tear down these prisons and jails, these cages, where they literally put our loved ones and treat them like animals. We cannot live for that. And when we start making, different decisions, okay, that person did this, so maybe they deserve to go. This person is a king or queen. We're going to honor them. You start to get into that decisiveness that Malcolm knew off the bat would not fly. We have to see each other, every single human being. You have to be able to see yourself in them, or else this is how they separate us. This is how you conquer and divide. So to answer the question, like, where is Malcolm alive today? Where do we see it? You see it right now with this genocide is happening. And people are standing up and saying, no, we will not allow you to kill our Palestinian brothers and sisters. That the students in university are willing to get arrested, who are being beaten. They do not care how they treat us, right? But you have that decision. What are you going to do? I believe in people power. The way we get social change is by all of us in this room and everyone we know and love fighting back. The 1%, the people at the top, they are not the masses. We are the masses, right? But what Malcolm warned us is happening, this tokenism, right? How many of y'all was celebrating when you saw your first black woman as vice president? What exactly? Kamala locked us up. She locked poor people up. We have to fight against that. We cannot settle for tokenism. We must see true justice. And as Malcolm told us, there is never any justice without peace. You cannot separate peace and justice. So if other brown and black people do not have peace, then we have no justice. And so with this current movement, I'm lauding all the young people who are putting their bodies on the line. I'm lauding all this cross-international solidarity. When we were marching in the streets in Detroit for over 100 days, you had groups like Detroit Will Breathe and Detroit Action, and everyone came out, Detroit Safety Team, right? We were letting our demands know that we are fighting back. And we're not gonna take no for an answer, right? So we're marching. We got help from our Palestinian brothers and sisters that were saying, when they pepper spray you, this is how you use milk in your eyes. This is what, don't use water. This is how we stay connected. This is what Malcolm, when he said we're gonna take the United States of America to the United Nations and charge genocide, he was not joking. They are literally killing us. To be a black woman in this country is to have a target on your back. They do not want us alive. They try to kill me when I have a baby. They try to kill me when we go to the hospital. When they pull us over, they are trying to kill us. So when I say that the time is now, I truly mean now. The urgency is here. We must act with skill and precision and forethought, but the times are urgent. And what are you doing? What is your call when you can say, I'm making food or I'm taking the kids to school? What is your part? There is a role for everyone. Everyone wants to talk about civil rights movement and the bus boycott. Y'all act like that joint happened in 10 days. That was over a year of sustained solidarity. We cannot even get sustained solidarity for strikes. People are like, oh, my pockets are thin, they're running back. This is how they divide and conquer. We must support and uplift each other. Malcolm is present in this room right now. I see the black economy at work right here in this room. When we support each other, when we keep that black dollar circulating, when we trade in time bank, when we trade in food, when we get back to who we are as a people, from West Africa, Central Africa, we were living a life that was beautiful before the white man came and destroyed it all. But we don't have to resort to where we currently are. We do need to open our eyes, though. Malcolm has given us warnings after warning, and are you heeding it? It's the question you need to go home and ask yourself. Because if you're just following the media and you're swallowing newspapers and listening to whoever, you will believe that the oppressor is your friend and that the victimizer is the oppressor. You have to open your eyes. Know who your enemy is. We have a common enemy. We must stay focused. And when you do that, you will see Malcolm in your everyday life. Thank you.
So to the question of who's carrying the spirit of Malcolm, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff said up here in the last few minutes, y'all. I'm gonna say in terms of who's carrying the spirit of Malcolm, let me just say without too much to say after this, that one of the local organizations that I see carrying the spirit, just in terms of just the raw, unadulterated love for our people, willingness to get out there block by block, meeting us where we are, giving us what we need, is New Era Detroit. And, I really love the commitment, the militancy, and just, again, they do what it takes. Really, I wrote down what Paul said earlier when he said, whatever the people need us to do. Because that's what community development organizations try to do, is like whatever the people need us to do in our neighborhoods. I hope, so part of me is mildly offended that Mama Shushanna thought I would sit here and tell a room full of black people, y'all can leave if you're not happy. But I appreciate that she gave me a chance to clarify what I meant by that. What I will say is, we live in a different time than Malcolm, man. Like when Malcolm was alive, there was no community development corporation. It did not exist. Today, that's the space I work in. We're trying to build affordable housing for people in the neighborhoods. We're trying to build commercial corridors where black people live in this city again. Like we're trying to build, and that's the vehicle that we have to do it. This nonprofit industrial complex, not to get too jargony with, but that didn't exist to the extent that it does when Malcolm. A lot of this was created in response to the social movement that Malcolm helped provoke in the late 60s, right? All of this corporatization, all of this control over how we do social change, that whole thing was created in response to the type of movement that Malcolm was leading. But as a result, those of us doing that work today, we do it in a very different context than Malcolm did. And, I'm as inspired by the next person by Malcolm's aspirations, by his sacrifice, by the revolutionary vigor. And I have to stand on what I said earlier, which we just ain't really cut the way he was cut. We just ain't. It's different. It's different. And that's not to diminish any of the day-to-day work that a lot of us are out here trying to do to make the city better, to make the country better, or what have you. What I will say is, lastly, is that Malcolm had a lot of options. And I'm gonna sit with Paul's distinction between revolutionary suicide versus being ready to die. But Malcolm didn't address the OAU, but he got to submit a letter to the OAU, which was far more than any other non-head of state was able to do, right? Malcolm was in talks with the Muslim World League and Al-Azhar University. Malcolm is in talks with the two leading global Muslim institutions in the world about extending their reach into the United States of America. Malcolm is, again, he's with Maya Angelou being invited to come stay in Ghana, come live in Ghana, right? Malcolm there are a lot of different choice points in front of him. To what I said earlier, we believe, when I say we as Muslims, our time is written. So Malcolm went when he was gonna go, but Malcolm chose to be in that revolutionary moment. Malcolm chose to walk to the Audubon by himself that day. Malcolm chose to release his security from the green room that day. Malcolm chose to step into that moment and to not run like that. That's the reality. I'm not gonna call it revolutionary suicide, but I will call it martyrdom, and we honor martyrs. So that's what I would just say about Malcolm. And then lastly is, Malcolm lived a short life, and we wonder what it would have been like. What would it have been like to actually be celebrating 99 years of Malcolm today? We got to celebrate, so none of us know what that would be like. What we do know is that Malcolm delivered to us a personal narrative that is more responsible for the spread of Islam in North America than any other text in the history of this world. Malcolm delivered to us a story of redemption that, whether it took you to Islam in particular or to faith in general, is the quintessential story of redemption that undergirds what faith even is. Right? Malcolm, the autobiography is responsible for the conversion of the most important scholars in the history of American Islam. So imagine the tree that Malcolm is at the root of. When you talk about modern day people like Imam Zayd Shakur, or or even the folks like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf or Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah, or Siraj Wahaj, like all of these leaders of today's Muslim community talk about Malcolm being that tipping point for them. Like he is the key to Islam in North America in a lot of ways. And I'm gonna stop because I don't want to just start waxing poetic, but like, I just want us to understand what he means for the establishment of Islam in this country. We don't acknowledge the greatness that he was. Allah have mercy on him.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was just asking me to expound on one of the basically safety tactics that frontline Black Lives Matter organizers and protesters were receiving through social media and everything else from the Palestinian brothers and sisters. And one of those key pieces of information was to pour milk in your eye when you get the pepper spray, the chemical gases that the police were just indiscriminately spraying in people's faces. That helps to contain the chemicals better than water. Water actually makes your eyes burn if you put that in there. And so that was just like one of the tactics that was shared from brothers and sisters in Gaza and everywhere else who have had this constant front line of just war, right? And so here in the States, we know that our military force get trained by the IDF, right? And so people who can't see themselves in the struggle, it's only because you're not reading, you're not looking, you're not aware enough, but it's all connected. And so we have a very big fight in this to help free the Palestinian people. And we know that we cannot be free unless they are free, because freedom is interwoven. You can't just have freedom from some and not freedom for all. That's not freedom at all. So that's what we're fighting for. We need continued solidarity with our faith community, our Muslim brothers and sisters, and everyone else in between, because this is not a fight that we can win independently. This is literally a collective fight. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get to you.
Yeah, I feel like the spirit of Malcolm, because I can feel the spirit of Malcolm in this room, and I feel that it's in every person in this room. Now, so far as the act of revolution, I think that very shortly, I think we're all going to come to realize that the path of revolutionary Black nationalism is the only path we can really take. When you look at the conditions of oppression that still exists and the fact that they're doubling down, all right? If these MAGA people get in power and they're determined to take power, even if they vote, even if he gets all the votes, they're gonna say they won and they're gonna take power by force. If we're not willing to defend ourselves with arms, we can be marched back to slavery. We're talking about some real monstrous people. And after Obama was elected, it really, and they say it themselves, so it brought out the beast in white people, and they're coming after us. They fought a war to keep us enslaved, and you still got these Confederates out here now under the name of MAGA, and they're determined to fight and keep us. Listen, Donald Trump says he's going to turn the DOJ into, okay, a place where they're looking at discrimination against white people. And the DOJ, I didn't know till the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd killings, that it was established after the Civil War because so many black people were killed by the Ku Klux Klan, so it was set up to stop the Ku Klux Klan. Trump is bringing the Klan into the Justice Department. You see, they've already made laws banning affirmative action, which is equal opportunity. They banned abortions. They banned critical race theory, which is just a study of their racist policies. They're banning Black history, Black studies. They're taking our votes. They're taking everything away from us now. They're declaring war on us now, and we're not doing anything about it. the revolutionary spirit that I found the strongest, and this was a case of revolutionary suicide. And I had told Shushanna, I don't know if I even want to talk about this because people think you're crazy. The heroes to me, and I've written my poems about them, those brothers that took out those policemen I think it was 2016. It was so much tension. They were killing innocent black people every week, and nobody was doing anything. You had protests, but nobody was fighting back with arms, and our people have always done that since we've been here. Mama Neb can tell you about, in the civil rights movement, how SNCC people, and even a lot of people in the South, that were not dealing with no nonviolent. Is Neb still here?
Yeah.
Okay, that they weren't dealing with no nonviolence because they wouldn't even be alive if they dealt like that. Check out black family history. Every black family had to kill some white people to defend their lives, and we're coming back to that. In this paper that I was gonna do, I'm saying Martin Luther King would be a guerrilla fighter for all the pushback that we've gotten since the movement, since the civil rights and black liberation movement. He would be a guerrilla fighter in Malcolm's army. Guerrilla warfare, revolutionary army. Maybe King would be the general. That's what I have in that. We gonna all be revolutionary nationalists, or we gonna all die or go back to slavery. I ain't even saying enslavement. That's taking the load. That's taking it like.
So I have one final question. There's a question from the audience, and then we would like for you all to, eat and enjoy yourself for the rest of the time you're in this space. But I'm gonna preface my question with our brother Malcolm. He was a human rights activist. I'm gonna say that again. He was a revolutionary. He was a black man who was an activist, who fought for his black people, but he also was a humanitarian who fought for justice throughout the world. And I was listening to one of his speeches earlier today about that massacre of the Congolese people and Congo, and he was speaking to us, his brothers and sisters here, and he said, y'all sit there and y'all think that don't concern you. He said, yes, that do concern you. He said, because the Holocaust they perpetrate on them today will be us tomorrow. So we are all should be concerned about it. And that, when I heard Malcolm speaking about that, I didn't know much about the Congo and that war. I know Europeans have perpetrated wars on people all over this world. But I thought about the Palestinian people, and I thought about the position right now where it's just outright genocide. And I thought about my political position, that I can't vote in good conscience for Biden because your hands are bloody, America, KKKA. You are complicit in committing genocide on the Palestinian people. And like Malcolm said, it's them today and it's us tomorrow. So we have to oppose you. We have to fight you. So this is my question. That issue is one that is burning and yearning in my heart and mind. And Malcolm, listening to him today, I found out what he would say about the Palestinian people and what's happening right now. So for each of you, what issue are we facing today as a people that, and how do you think Malcolm would handle it, or what would Malcolm say about it? A very significant injustice that is occurring right now today in 2024. What would our brother Malcolm, you think, say about it? So we're gonna go back that way? Okay.
Malcolm talked about the Democrats and Republicans and referred to them as the fox and the wolf. Both of them gonna devour you. Neither one has benefited us. I mean, let's not forget, y'all. I mean, you can follow each one of these imperialist presidents, including Obama, and just ask yourself, in what concrete way have we benefited? We're not talking about what they do right on the cusp of an election. You know, people pressuring Biden right now because he feeling like he may lose some vote, and he will. But the bottom line is, now one of them benefited us. They never have and they never will. Our problem is wanting to believe that the lesser of two evils is not evil. Do y'all understand where I'm coming from? Malcolm X understood that, and he talked about it again and again. The fox and the wolf. So not voting is also a vote, because I know you're not going to abandon Biden and then go to Trump, because you know his disposition. So, I mean, but not voting is a vote of no confidence. But in not voting, what do you do? Self-determination don't require involvement with them. What are you going to do to work towards whatever it is that we think that we're going to have, whatever tomorrow's supposed to look like? We're supposed to be working on that now. Not waiting on it, not expecting somebody else to do it. Baba Malik didn't do the stuff. He frustrated every time somebody try to put all the weight on him. It takes all of us. And we all have work to do. Ain't no great leader gonna come save us. Malcolm was great, but he was collecting people along the way. He was bringing people into building teams. The people that created the Republic of New Africa, began the New African Independence Movement. Milton Henry, you read his name in the books, they called him Gaidi Obadeli. He was from Detroit. He traveled to Africa with Malcolm. He recorded some of his most known speeches, Battle of the Bullet, Mention of the Grassroots, and circulated those records. He was collecting. He was a Yale-trained attorney. He was collecting people that can help do the work. But that meant that Malcolm understood that he wasn't the only one that can do it. He was a teacher, but he couldn't do all the work himself. He was very aware of that. And we got to be clear that ain't no individual, no matter how charismatic, how well articulate they are, that they're going to be the ones to save us. They might be able to speak for us, and that's only if we allow them to speak for us. Because everybody with a mouth ain't talking on behalf of the people, because some of them ain't even asking people what they're thinking about. You know, so let's be clear that Malcolm said one is the fox and one is the wolf, and we can apply that to Biden and to Trump.
Facts, absolutely. I think this question, anytime it's lodged, whether it's Brother Malcolm or any of our revolutionary leaders, it's always so heavy on me because it's an impossible question, right? Literally. If Malcolm was still alive, I would hope and pray that this world looks different. It can't look like what it does now. We've lost our way so much. And okay, yes, we're not in chattel slavery, but we're definitely still in mental slavery. And so there's just a lot of education that really still needs to happen. And to answer that question, I really can only say what we already know. Malcolm literally would be saying, read my speeches. I've already told y'all what's going on. So again, when you know your history, you know your future, you know where you're going. All of this is just a broken record that we have heard over and over and over again. When will we finally organize? There's absolutely nobody coming to save us. We are the saviors. We are here. When will we finally get together, figure out who are we putting forward? Who is the party? What are we doing collectively? Instead of splintering, instead of people getting bought, there is no price for me. What about you? These are questions. Folks always say, okay, what about the inside game, Nancy? What about politics? We get somebody on the inside. Show me where. When has that ever worked? We are sitting right here today, what would have been Malcolm's 99th birthday, debating the exact same things that he was debating in 64, 63. What are we doing? They gave you a little piece of land, a little piece of house, a little bit of money, some grant, and you got excited. And you forgot about all your people. We have to do the work. You're either in it or you're not. What are you doing? What would Malcolm say? Malcolm would be just aghast. Like, I've warned you time and time again, and we're in the same plight. We still have people saying, oh, I don't really mess with those Africans over there, da da da. In 2024, you don't want to mess with me? I'm willing to die for every single black person, and you don't want to mess with me? Why do we keep doing this? We have to unite. It's plain and simple. All of our revolutionary leaders have already given us the blueprint. Will we read it? Will we follow? Will we do what is necessary? Or will we be comfortable because we've got ours?
Bismillah. So I mean, I don't have a lot to say to this one. I think I think it's worth acknowledging, right, that in regards to what you mentioned earlier, as far as Palestine goes, I mean, Malcolm spoke on Palestine. You know, Malcolm named, you know, the Zionist entity as this colonial entity. You know, Malcolm obviously talked about black people being internally colonized and then connected our status here to international anti-colonial struggles. So, you know, this is a moment that Malcolm witnessed and spoke to in his own lifetime. And unfortunately, more and more of Palestine has been lost in our lifetimes, but I think his analysis was already in place even you know, back in 63 and 64 when it comes to what's happening in that part of the world. I think the other piece that's worth noting is, and I'll be real with y'all, like I'm an organizer. I work at an organization that like focuses specifically on the Muslim community in addition to our local residential base, which is predominantly not Muslim, mainly black, just on the west side of Detroit. I'm not a faith leader in our community. I don't give sermons. I don't give khutbahs in the Muslim community. That's not my role. But you know, I read Malcolm first at 14. And I went to school after that telling all my friends we couldn't use certain words and nobody could drink and nobody could smoke. And it was, you know, this message of like personal refinement and right, like that was what I took from it initially. Then I read it, the autobiography again at 18 and connected more with Malcolm's like revolutionary politics. And then it wasn't until I started reading Malcolm's speeches and starting to read the biography for a third time at like 20 that I started to understand what Islam meant to him, that I started to understand what he meant in the history of Islam in this country, and that I started to acknowledge how prolific of what we call a da'i, like a caller to this way of life Malcolm was, right? So like 6 miles from here, right off Linwood and Burlingame, Malcolm would go to the masjid, to the temple, every day after work in downtown, and go quote unquote fishing in the neighborhoods, looking for anybody who looked broken with a message that we have a message of self-empowerment that can free you from whatever personal ills that you're facing. And we have a message of community empowerment that can make you look at our people differently and your place in this world differently. But Malcolm died both building the Organization of Afro-American Unity and the Muslim Mosque, Inc., right? Like Malcolm never abandoned his religious mission, even as he was reframing his mission around race in the US. And just to be clear, when I talked earlier about Malcolm's sacrifice, Malcolm did sacrifice a little bit of that public Muslim image toward the end of his life, right? In the Ballad of the Bullet, Malcolm stands up there and says, you know, we can leave our religion in the closet at home. You know, that's not something, you know, that you would find most converts today really willing to say, like, oh, let's just put our religion in the closet. But Malcolm knew that his message, centering black people, that he had to subvert that a little bit to gain access to the spaces he needed to be in where decision makers would hear his message. He was willing to sacrifice that a little bit in the name of strategy and making sure that he could be at the table. Because Malcolm experienced that no matter how black I am and no matter how committed I am to this, being a black Muslim places me somewhat on the margins in this community that I love dearly and am giving my life to. Right? So Malcolm was even willing to sacrifice some of that public identity, but he never gave up on Islam. He never stopped building his Muslim community.
I believe I had already answered the question, because in my paper it was like, what would Malcolm do? And my thing was he would be forming an underground guerrilla warfare army. And I say that because, remember, that is what he did back in April 27, 1962, where it was an incident in Los Angeles between the police and the Brothers of the Masjid. The police shot 7 of them. One of them died, who was a close friend of Malcolm. He cried like a baby, all right, when this man died, because Malcolm had started that mosque out in Los Angeles. Another guy was paralyzed, all right, the others recovered. He goes back and tries to unite with other civil rights leaders, but he goes back to New York and organizes a self-defense militia, guerrilla army, whatever. Elijah Muhammad put a stop to it, all right? He put the lid on it. He said, no, you can't do that. But Malcolm was gonna do it. He was going down to LA to take on the police with a bunch of brothers out of New York. And I believe with all the police murders that's taking place and all the other things that are going on, he would be doing the same thing, and Martin Luther King would be with him as general of the army.
I think there's a brother, right? You want to come up, brother?
We could give Ikemba and
So it was a question that was posed. I can stand right here. All right. So how everybody doing tonight? My name is Soweto. I didn't plan to be here. I'm tired, just got off work. And so it was a question that was posed, who Malcolm X is, right? And so concisely, Malcolm X argued for black power, black self-defense, and black economic autonomy, and encouraged racial pride. He saw Christianity as a religion for the white man, fine-tuned to perpetuate subjugation of the black race. And so when we really think about Malcolm X, right, everybody say he died too young, right, before he was really able to grow into himself. So Malcolm X was a dynamic being. He wasn't stagnant. We've seen this throughout his life, right? He started to challenge the views of the Nation of Islam, you know what I'm saying? And if he would have kept going, who knows where he would have been. And then when you think about when Malcolm X lived, when he lived, he didn't have the capacity to research as we do now. So there's no telling where Malcolm X would have been, right? Because when you think about him challenging the views of the Nation of Islam, once he started to learn more, what if he would have came into this? For centuries, caravans of Arab and Berber traders transported African captives from sub-Saharan Africa, trekking along this series of arduous stages to the slave markets of the Mediterranean, Asia, and Europe. From the 8th century, demand for African slaves was accentuated by the spread of Islam. And so, by saying that, Islam was what gave away to the transatlantic slave trade. And if Malcolm X would have knew that, I don't think Malcolm X would have remained on that trajectory. I just got out of prison 2 months ago. And me being in prison, what I see a lot of is a lot of black people that convert, and I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be argumentative or nothing like that, but this is something that needs to be talked about. Blacks in prison, they parochialize themselves to their studies, and a lot of people do that. A lot of people become intellectually lazy, and a lot of people give in to dogmatism, and nobody does their own research on their own, and that's something that I just feel as though we should start doing. I feel as though to convert from Islam was a quick fix and the escape from white subjugation. I feel that's what that was, and if Malcolm X would have still been alive, Pan-Africanism, when you talk about Malcolm X fighting for black power, black liberation, Pan-Africanism, that energy is being dispersed when we accept these things that subjugate us and conquer us. We can't keep trading one conqueror for another conqueror. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's it.
Because you know what, I don't want to be rude, but I may be rude. We didn't let anyone else ask questions. I was asked to allow you to come up because you had a question the entire time. We ran overtime, and so we have to give them their closing remarks. But thank you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
I would really like to address this brother, but it would be so long, like afterwards. Because what you're saying, it has caused a great amount of confusion within our communities and why we cannot get together, all right? So that's why I want to say, because I know it would be too long, but it's something I want to share with you. And even Malik had brought something up about the destruction of black civilization, which again is a great book. The Afrocentric scholars, we stand on their shoulders, but there were some serious errors being made because they're listening to the narratives that are mainly coming from white racist scholars. This whole notion about Arabs coming in to North Africa or even West Africa, which they tell you over and over never happened in West Africa, is the big lie that many of our scholars have imbibed. When you look at the African story, which we are never looked at, you got a whole different story. And something else that you have in African historiography that they don't have in Western historiography are the genealogies, all right? Connecting every people to their family so you know who is who. What's happened is the European scholars come down there and they say, well, these people, they're saying they came from Egypt, they came from Palestine, they came from Saudi Arabia, they're all coming from the East. European scholars come down there and say, oh no, that's nonsense, that couldn't happen. They came from here and here and here. And they couldn't have come from these places. And the African scholars believe them. Most of them believe them, have been educated in the West. And they're still perpetuating the big lie. What happened in North Africa, it was the opposite thing that happened. Number one, the Arabs are not white, they're black. They're as black as anybody in here from every complexion. If you go to Saudi Arabia today, you will see that the country is 85% black. And the first European that even came into Saudi Arabia was Sir Richard Burton in the 19th century. Now you had all these others who had gone through miscegenation, but this white Arab comes from the Crusaders who were coming down to take back Jerusalem, right, from the Muslims. They come, they lost most of the wars, and there's a lot of people, I'm telling you, there's a lot of great people in history that we think are white, like Jesus and Muhammad, who were black, who are our ancestors. We keep talking about ancestors. We don't even know who our ancestors are because every last one of us is an ancestor according to our people of Prophet Muhammad and Noah, who is Asar. Direct ancestors, they are our literal grandparents, and so is Prophet Muhammad. Your literal grandfathers who you're talking about, brother. And I can break it down to you in the mathematics and the genealogical DNA analysis, where it's not possible that we're not the direct descendants. You see what I'm saying? So the big lie is that they went in, they conquered North Africa, all of North Africa was black except the Romans who came in, took over all of the lands that had come from the Carthaginians. All right, after the Punic Wars, you saw the Punic Wars with Hannibal. After the Punic Wars, the Romans took all of the lands that had belonged to the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians are the Canaanites, right? Black people. Then, after they did that, they had these very strict rules and laws, draconian laws like you had in the South, Jim Crow South, and apartheid South Africa. Blacks and whites were not allowed to marry. They were not allowed to live in the same communities. There was a terrible oppression of black people by the Romans, and they were segregated. They couldn't go to the same schools. They couldn't go live in their neighborhoods. They could not marry. It was against the law. So you had this revolution, the Christianity, and that's another thing they say is a white man's religion. No, Christianity was a Pan-African, anti-colonial movement against the Romans. That's what it was. They didn't have the military wherewithal, so they used the process of civil disobedience, protests. Jesus' message, when you look at it, they make it sound like it was more like King. It was more like Garvey. It was Garvey's message. That was Jesus' message. He said, stay away from the Gentiles. Don't practice their religion. Don't take their names. Don't eat their foods. Practice your own culture. Keep your own names. Build your own communities. Become self-reliant, and that's what they started doing. This is where you have your first socialist, almost pure communist communities being started because all the Christians took all of their earnings and they redistributed it so that they were able to eradicate poverty. Then they started building churches. Then they started, okay, if I can just finish. Then they started building churches. And then universal education started. All right, but then once the Europeans adopted the religion, and this is the same thing that happened with Islam, the Nicene Conference, the introduction of the Trinity, the whole thing about Constantine having this vision that if he became a Christian, he was going to take over all the Christian empires. So that's when the Byzantines take control of the older, earlier Roman Empire. So you get the Eastern and Western, but they're the same.
Just took us to school. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
We're going to have Sister Nubia come back and give us some more history lessons. But whoever else...
Well, I wanted to finish with what Islam completed.
so I just want to close it out just in respect to those of you who joined us and to our vendors. I extend and continue the invitation into this space, Cass Commons, as a community space, and what we witnessed here and partook in here today, this discourse and this thinking out loud and this feeling out loud, is what we protect when we protect space and when we build institutions. It's what is being protected when we protect the Shed, when we protect Detroit Justice Center, when we protect Dream. Mama Nubia's work is protecting thought and protecting truth. And so I just want to thank you for being so attentive and so disciplined. And I want to close out just by reading the quote on the back of the shirt, not because we're trying to sell a shirt, which we are, go get it, but because it's a beautiful quote, and because discourse and dialectics and disagreement requires this above all, to ensure that we don't fracture over a different perspective. If you're building something with a group of people and you need to get it right, sometimes you stand over here and you look. Then you tell your partner, go over there and have a look. What do you see? Is it right? That's sometimes sharing different perspectives. Or another way to look at it is, we've got a lot of things to carry in our community to make it from point A to point B. We got a lot of baggage. We got a lot of truth, a lot of experience. And as we go there, we only have two arms. So sometimes some people have to hold one thought and the other person has to hold another thought. And we have to create space for people to hold that thought and be willing to be challenged, and then we move forward towards truth. And so that's why it's important that Malcolm said in the Battle of the Bullet in '64 in Cleveland, right? Because he gave this speech several times, or at least twice, yeah, but I think maybe even 3 or 4 times in the Midwest. He said we got to change our own minds about each other, because we spend a lot of time trying to change other people's mind about us. We got to change our own minds about each other. We have to see each other with new eyes. We have to see each other as brothers and sisters, as family. We have to come together, and this is the most important part, with warmth. We have to challenge ideas with warmth. We have to present the information as we did here with warmth. We have to study with warmth. Malcolm said there was a time when you didn't know what you know. You don't ridicule and shame, right, someone for learning. So we have to come together with warmth. And I'm so glad we did that here today. So that we can develop, he says, unity and harmony. Because it's so important that we keep talking about what is revolutionary work. And revolutionary work, we know, is change. It's transformation of society. And it changes society in every way that injustice has been sustained. It overturns it, it dismantles it, it rearranges it, and brings in new things.